You think drowning is bad? Try drowning from the inside out while a crowd of nobles watches and places bets on how long you'll last. Welcome to the court of King Louis XIV, where entertainment meant something very different than it does today. Picture this. It's 1682, and you're a servant accused of stealing a silver spoon from the royal kitchens. You didn't do it, of course, but in Versailles, guilt is determined by spectacle, not evidence. Your punishment? The water ceremony, a practice so grotesque that even the executioners would get drunk before performing it. They'd strap you to a marble table in the palace courtyard, tilt your head back until your throat was a straight line to your stomach, and then the real fun would begin. A funnel would be shoved between your teeth, sometimes cracking them in the process, and then water would pour. Not just any water, though. This was water mixed with vinegar, sometimes urine from the palace chamber pots, and on special occasions, liquid extracted from rotting animal carcasses kept specifically for this purpose in the dungeons below. The theory was simple. If you were innocent, God would allow you to swallow it all and survive. If you were guilty, you'd choke, vomit, and drown in your own fluids, while courtiers in powdered wigs sipped champagne and discussed whether your convulsions looked like a dance they'd seen at last week's ball. But here's where it gets even more twisted. The servants performing this torture were required to sing hymns while pouring, as if the holy music would somehow sanctify the barbarism. They'd pour and pour until your stomach distended like a pregnant woman's belly, until you could see the outline of your own organs pressing against your skin, until the pressure was so intense that liquid would start seeping from your ears and nose. And if you passed out, they'd revive you with smelling salts and start all over again, because the king demanded a minimum of 3 cycles before a verdict could be declared. One documented case from the palace archives tells of a young kitchen maid named Marguerite, who endured 7 cycles over the course of 4 hours. By the end, witnesses reported that her stomach had ruptured internally, and she was vomiting not just water, but pieces of her own stomach lining mixed with blood so dark it looked like wine. She died 3 days later, but not before confessing to crimes she'd never committed, including witchcraft, poisoning the king's dogs, and having carnal relations with the devil himself. Her confession was written down by a scribe as she screamed it through broken teeth, and it now sits in the Bibliothèque Nationale de France, filed under Divine Justice Served. The nobles loved this form of execution because it was considered clean. No blood splattered on their silk clothing, no unseemly hacking with axes or burning flesh stench from the stake. Just water, the substance of life itself, transformed into an instrument of death so elegant that ladies would bring their children to watch and teach them about the consequences of sin. But the French weren't the only ones who understood that drowning didn't require an ocean. In medieval Scotland, there existed a practice called the drowning pear, though calling it drowning is almost too kind. The device looked innocent enough, a small metal pear-shaped instrument that could fit in your palm, decorated with engravings of angels and saints because, apparently, irony was big in the 14th century. This little beauty was reserved for women accused of adultery, blasphemy, or the catch-all crime of causing disruption to the natural order, which could mean anything from refusing to marry the man your father chose to laughing too loudly in church. The pear would be inserted into one of your body's natural openings, and I'll let you imagine which one's based on your specific crime, because the Scots believed in matching the punishment to the sin. Once inside, a screw mechanism on the outside would slowly expand the pear, opening like a metal flower blooming inside your flesh. But here's the diabolical genius. The pear was hollow and had tiny holes drilled throughout its surface. As it expanded, tearing tissue and muscle, executioners would pour liquid into the top. Sometimes water, sometimes wine if they were feeling fancy, but most often a mixture of holy water and liquefied pig fat, because nothing says repent, quite like drowning in blessed lard from the inside. The victim would feel the liquid filling spaces inside their body that were never meant to hold liquid, pressure building in cavities that had no way to release it until eventually the fluid would find its way into the bloodstream. Survivors, and yes, some actually survived this reported feeling like they were drowning while simultaneously being inflated like a bladder, a sensation so uniquely horrifying that many would gnaw through their own tongues rather than endure another moment of it. The real kicker? This was considered a merciful alternative to burning at the stake. Women would actually request the pair, seeing it as the lesser evil, not knowing that the average ordeal lasted between 6 to 8 hours, and that, as if the executioner was having a good day and didn't decide to take a lunch break mid-torture, leaving you suspended in agony while he enjoyed his mutton and ale. Now, let's talk about something that makes waterboarding look like a spa treatment. The ancient Persian practice of scaphism, which roughly translates to the boats, but should really be called how to turn a human being into an insect nursery while they're still alive and screaming. The Persians were artists when it came to making death last as long as possible, and scaphism was their masterpiece, an execution method so elaborately cruel that it took days of preparation and could take weeks to actually kill you. Here's how your final days would unfold. You'd be stripped naked and forced to consume massive amounts of milk and honey. Not a little bit, we're talking gallons of the stuff, force-fed until your body couldn't process it anymore, and you develop the most violent diarrhea imaginable. Then comes the real creativity. You'd be placed inside a hollowed-out log or small boat, and another log or boat would be placed on top, creating a coffin with strategic holes cut out for your head, hands, and feet. The two pieces would be nailed together, sealing you inside with just enough room that you couldn't move, but plenty of room for what was coming next. They'd smear more honey all over your exposed face, hands, and feet, and then more honey would be poured inside the coffin, coating your immobilized body in a sticky, sweet death trap. Then you'd be set adrift on a stagnant pond under the blazing Persian sun. Within hours, your skin would start blistering from the heat, and the honey would begin to ferment against your flesh, creating a smell that would attract every flying insect within miles. Flies would lay eggs in the honey on your face, and within a day, maggots would begin hatching, burrowing into your nostrils. Your ears, the corners of your eyes, feeding on the honey at first, but eventually tunneling into your flesh. Meanwhile, you're still defecating uncontrollably from all that milk, creating a festering cesspool inside the coffin that would attract even more insects. Your own waste would burn chemical wounds into your skin, and the combination of excrement and honey would create a bacterial paradise that would cause infection so severe that witnesses reported being able to smell the victims from a quarter-mile away. But here's what really makes scaphism special. You wouldn't die quickly. The honey kept being reapplied every day by guards who would also force-feed you more milk to keep you alive, because the whole point was to maximize suffering. Victims would survive for anywhere from 2 to 3 weeks conscious, for most of it feeling every single maggot squirming through their rotting flesh, every fly laying eggs in their open wounds every moment as their own body became a living hive of decomposition. One recorded case from the reign of Mithridates describes a man named Bagoas who lasted 17 days. By day 4, his face was unrecognizable, just a writhing mass of larvae and rotting tissue. By day 7, the insects had eaten through to his skull in several places. By day 10, he could no longer scream because his vocal cords had been consumed by beetles that had burrowed down his throat. And yet he lived, his eyes still moving, still aware, still trapped inside what was left of his body as it was slowly eaten alive from both the inside and outside simultaneously. The execution was considered complete only when the victim's body had been so consumed by insects and decay that it separated into pieces, at which point the coffin would be opened and whatever remained would be fed to pigs, because apparently, even in death, the Persians weren't done humiliating you. Historical records suggest that this method was reserved for the worst criminals, particularly those guilty of regicide or betraying the king's trust. But there are also accounts of it being used as a form of entertainment during royal festivals, with multiple victims set adrift at once so nobles could bet on who would last the longest. The screaming could be heard across the palace grounds for days, a constant reminder of what happened to those who crossed the wrong people. And if you're thinking this sounds too horrible to be true, that surely no civilization could be this systematically cruel. Remember that the same culture that gave us beautiful poetry and advanced mathematics also gave us this, because humanity has always had a special talent for transforming creativity into suffering, for taking the basic elements of life like water, honey, and sunlight, and weaponizing them into nightmares that would make demons uncomfortable. These weren't accidents or crimes of passion. These were carefully designed, officially sanctioned, culturally accepted methods of killing people as slowly and painfully as possible, carried out by professionals who went home to their families afterward and probably slept just fine.